Are you familiar with the idea of bundling versus unbundling? Think about some of the things that get bundled together. You bundle all of your TV channels together and work with a cable company, as an example. Or you unbundle all of those channels and you work directly with the specific organization that's delivering the product or service into the marketplace. We bundle subscriptions, we bundle services, we bundle products. We merge groups together to help serve a need across a large organization. It creates an opportunity for us to add additional scope to the work that we're delivering and increase revenue from a business perspective. So bundling versus unbundling, really, if you think about it, actually the way I like to think about it is specialization versus generalization. One of the things that Aaron Ross did in Predictable Revenue is he showed how you could specialize specific roles to serve a specific purpose. And unfortunately, I think it did a lot of damage to the experience that our customers ultimately have. You have that whole SDR or BDR role, depending on if they report into sales or marketing. Then you have that AE role, and then you either have that AM or success role, depending on how you're structured. These all work really, really well in the right context. The problem is you're probably looking at it and saying, ooh, I need to do that because that's what everybody else is doing, and now I want to apply it into my context. And what you forget is the common thread across all of this, and we've talked about this before in the context of game of life. Remember, you have the customer who has a problem that they need to solve, needs to get up to the top of the mountain so that they can shout back and tell everybody else about it. And do we really want to have this just disjointed experience that they need to go through? Do we need to bundle or do we need to unbundle? Do we need to create specialization all the way through? Here's how I like to think about it. I like to think about it in the context of jobs to be done. And if you're not familiar with jobs to be done, take a look at Clayton Christensen's work. Do a search for Clayton Christensen, milkshake, and HBR, and you will get jobs to be done stuff to you. Here's how I apply it to this context. The other day I did a post. I talked about demand, acquisition, retention, plus expansion. And if you look at these letters, we have dare to grow, which covers this whole area. What we're not talking about are functional teams inside each of these areas. Now, a lot of people would put most of the work on marketing in the demand section. But here's the reality. If you think about marketing from the context of communicating from one to many across multiple people at a given point in time, helping to create clarity in that communication, marketing actually goes across all of these functional areas or all of these specific. Let's actually break it down into what I was talking about before, jobs to be done. The first job to be done is generating demand. The second job to be done is acquiring a customer for the first time. The third job to be done is to retain and expand that customer. What are the things that are necessary? What are the things that need to be true in each of these individual bucket areas to help make that happen? Who are the people who could ultimately do that? How will that change across functional teams? And as you're seeing more convergence across functional areas inside businesses, especially when more and more things are being automated and we're being asked to do more work with fewer resources, you're going to see this blurring where I think we're starting to bundle specific roles across, or even bundle specific jobs across multiple functions inside the business. Where am I going? And why did I do this on a Whiteboard Wednesday? Well, one of the things that I'd like to see if I could help you shift your mindset around, shift your perspective around, is what if we applied a jobs to be done framework to our go-to-market teams? What if we actually said, hey, here are the functional jobs that need to happen with customers in the process, and then from there, determine how do we actually go about solving for those individual things. So we need to generate demand inside the organization so that it can serve the customer, the internal customer inside the organization, where sales can figure out a way to start acquiring more customers. And when those customers are acquired, There needs to be some kind of communication to help serve the customers in here from a success perspective so they expand, they grow, because growing customers typically are retained. So if our job is growth here, our job is acquisition here, and our job is demand here, how do we figure out who does what by when inside each of those individual areas? And not politic inside our business to say that's a marketing function, or that's a sales function, or that's an account management function, or a success function. Maybe it's a business capability function. And I'm putting a lot of stuff out there, which could be confusing because there's a number of different ways to look at it. And that's the beauty or the hard part about all of this stuff is it can get very complex if you start looking at the whole piece. But when you break it down into the smaller section and say, you know what, right now I want to focus on the specific job to be done, which is generate demand across the marketplace so that that demand can convert. Now we can put time, energy, and attention specifically on demand and say, okay, well, inside demand as a function, what are the specific skills that are necessary? Who are the specific people who can do those skills? What is it that they like about that specific work that gets them interested, compels them to actually get really creative and deliberate about what they're building inside those areas? So from a demand perspective, the skills are things like design, communication. We're getting into some leadership focus skills, right? Design, communication, maybe some problem solving, and maybe even some decision making. Heck, even execution. These are those leadership skills that we were talking about a little bit earlier this week in that first video. How do those ultimately get applied in this context? Well, we've got to make some decisions around what tools we use, tech. We've got to make some decisions around where we focus time, energy, attention. Who are the ICPs? How can we do that as a team with the communication with the people who are working on the acquisition side so that all of the work in this specific bucket, this specific area, leads to conversions into the next area? When you do this well, when you break your business, your go-to-market team down into specific functional jobs to be done, and then layer over roles that can support each of those individual jobs, and then people who have those skills inside each of those jobs, you can start to simplify your approach by narrowing focus down into one area, identify next logical steps, specific things that need to happen so that you can take them. And with that level of clarity, you'll be able to move your business forward. So my recommendation as we're going through this, as we go through this challenge of, hey, do we specialize or do we generalize, is first figure out who is it that you're trying to serve. What's the makeup of those people in that area that you're trying to serve, both internal and external? And does it make sense for people to take on more broad, or does it make more sense for people to focus on a specific thing and get that thing done? And then now we just test what the conversions look like, that handoff looks like between each of those areas. When you add layers to the work that you're doing, you're going to create complexity. If you take all of those layers and deconstruct them into smaller pieces, demand, acquisition, retention, and expansion, maybe even going on the retention and expansion to strategic accounts, general accounts, and churn accounts, and start focusing on those areas, you could start putting the right level of focus in the specific area and start actually figuring out, what do you want to test? Are the tests working the way that you expect them to? And if they are, now you can invest more. Or if they aren't, then you've got to figure out what you're going to change. Let's take an operations-oriented approach, systems, process-driven approach to this challenge that we have from a go-to-market perspective as everything continues to evolve. And what I will expect that you're going to have happen is as you lay this out on your board, you're actually going to realize maybe the right answer is that it's not a specific title anymore or a specific team anymore. It's more about the specific job to be done in each of those areas and whether or not you got the right person in the right place to take care of that. Let me know if this helped you think a little bit differently in the context of go-to-market, get a little bit more exposure into the whole idea of jobs to be done, and then moves you to a point where you start thinking about, how would I actually lay this out inside my organization? What might change? And should it be part of the thinking that I'm applying as we get ready for 2026? If you need some help with this kind of stuff and you want to work through a whiteboard session as a team, head to coachsimmons.com. You'll be able to see all of the information there. If you just want to go a little bit deeper on the content, you can find your catalyst at findmycatalyst.com.